Welcome back. I'm Mac, the Gray Skeptic, and today we're focusing on the topic of morality. Strap in. In my last video about morality, I ended with a formula that I think you need to even get to the concept of morality. So let's start there. Consciousness, knowledge, and empathy. Humans tend to have all three of these traits, thus making morality a concept that we all need and care about. Without these three traits, though, I don't think we would have what we refer to as morality. What do we refer to as morality anyways? The accepted definition is the principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong and good and bad behavior. Some also define it as the distinction between good and evil. I don't like the second definition though, because it's really hard to define good and evil without someone trying to give them some kind of embodiment. Example, God is good and Satan is evil. Since we lack evidence for such beings, and I believe that good and bad are subjective concepts, what causes what we might call good or bad? Acts, of course. But what kind of acts? I'm going to say altruistic and malevolent acts. Now follow me on this because I would like your input. This is my formula for how to judge a moral situation. You take altruism and malevolence and you put them on a spectrum, and then you add cause and effect factors. That equals better or worse outcomes. Place these outcomes on a scale of moral, more moral, neutral, more immoral, or immoral. The moral and immoral ends of this spectrum are not particularly absolutes. They're just representative of the most moral and immoral possible outcomes for the situation. You could even tack on most to each end of the spectrum just to make it easier to understand. Just to add what is beyond this scale, anything that doesn't fall into the spectrum is an amoral concern. Amoral being it's not a moral issue. I think this way to measure morality suggests that morality itself is more relative rather than subjective or objective, which for someone who has considered themselves a moral subjectivist kind of came as a surprise. All right, now that we have that, I'd really like to go through whether I think morality could be objective or subjective, since there's so much controversy on this topic. I think that it could be objective if there was a God, but I have already pointed out why I think this is a weak argument. So let's consider that morality stems from our cognition through evolution. I think then we get to define it and what it means. I feel like then if that's the case, then it would almost have to be based on humanism and basic compassion, though I think much of this premise still screams relativism. Furthermore, if we're basing it on humanism, I think that there are still instances, like culture, where this could be very subjective. And I hate this. This leaves primitive tribes who practice cannibalism and ancient texts that condone slavery and genocide out on the table for moral subjectivism. I think the only way to get a clear definition of what is more moral or immoral is how we define it and how we measure it. I think what Sam Harris does by measuring morality with more or less pain is a pretty good analogy. I also think it falls into my moral framework. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Also, please consider sharing this so I can get as much feedback as humanly possible. I would really like to build onto this theory or correct it where it needs it. Thanks again for watching, and remember, the answers are in the gray area.